The bill is not going to be before us for a vote today. We're having a hearing on House Bill 95, and we have several great presenters on both sides of the subject. And House Bill 95 deals with balance billing, or sometimes referred to as surprise billing. I'm going to recognize Commissioner Cheney's office first to give us a history on this bill, and since he would be administering it, letting us know if he's willing to take that obligation on and what he thinks he can do for the consumers should we take this bill up.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I need to wear a mask talking to this a month.
Whether you feel comfortable.
Well, first off, I'm going to introduce my staff: Mark Hare, Bob Williams. Mark Hare is the Deputy Commissioner, Bob Williams, the Director of Life and Health, and Kim Gillespie, our General Lead Counsel. I'm going to ask Commissioner Hare to come forward and talk a little bit about HB95 as it relates to balance billing, and then I'll come back. So Mark Hare.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, in 2013, the legislature passed a bill stating that an insured may assign his or her benefits to the medical provider rendering services. And when that assignment occurs, the insurance company has no choice but to pay that medical provider directly for the care that was provided. The law goes on to say that if the provider accepts the assignment of benefits and is paid directly by the provider, then that medical provider cannot bill the insured for amounts more than what the insurance company paid. Now, that wouldn't apply to deductibles, co-pays, co-insurance, and uncovered services. Those could certainly be billed directly to the insured because they owe that directly. I think another key point here is to keep in mind when the insured is treated by an out-of-network provider, the insurer generally is going to impose an out-of-network penalty, so the reimbursement to an out-of-network provider is going to be a bit lower than what a network provider receives. So Code Section 8395, as cited in House Bill 95, is aimed at prohibiting balance billing by out-of-network providers. As insurance regulator, we generally are going to see two types of complaints on balance billing issues. The first, the insured knowingly goes to an out-of-network provider for whatever reason and then gets a bill, makes an assignment of benefits that's accepted by the provider, and then that insured receives a bill for an amount over and above what the insurance company pays. Statute's pretty clear. It says you're not supposed to do that. The second type of complaint we receive involves what we typically refer to as surprise balance billing. An example would be where the patient goes to an in-network hospital for an inpatient procedure. The anesthesiologist who administers anesthesia is out of network. Well, the insured has no idea of that and is under the impression that all care will be reimbursed at in-network rates. So the insurance company pays the out-of-network anesthesiologist directly. The anesthesiologist accepts that payment as an assignment of benefits and then sends the insured a bill for an amount over and above what the insurer pays. And the statute, again, seems to be directly on point and would prohibit that balance billing. Now, I will say that the department has had some success, especially right after the bill passed in 2013. Many providers had to become acclimated to the fact that the law was out there and how it worked. And especially our Mississippi providers have been really good when we contact them and say, look, this law is out here, you're not supposed to balance bill. They will work with the patient. Some, however, especially out-of-state companies who employ providers and contract them out to hospitals, like in the situation with the anesthesiologist that I mentioned, they will challenge our authority and jurisdiction to even become involved and pretty well ignore the insurance regulator in trying to get the issue resolved. The problem is further exacerbated when you see that type issue referred out to a collection agency. The collection agencies are not going to budge unless their provider clients say pull back on this, and we're pretty much ignored by the collection agencies. So I think the question really becomes, how would House Bill 95 help in this situation? The bill adds 2 sentences to the balanced billing law. The new language says that any dispute between a provider and the insured arising under the assignment of benefits and billing provisions in the current statute may be resolved by the commissioner. And the second sentence says the commissioner shall adopt rules and regs necessary to enforce the subject provisions regarding assignment of benefits and billing. Most importantly, what this does is it gives the issue a landing spot. It would allow the department to say, we've now got express authority to work with the parties, to work with the provider and the insured to try to sort through this issue and make sure that everybody is complying with the law. And we would be in a position to tell that collection agency, you know what, the Mississippi legislature says we do have some jurisdiction here to try to help work through these issues and make sure that everybody is in compliance with statutory law.
Commissioner, I want to make a point on that. The word may, it was changed in the bill. It formerly said shall, and it was an obligation on your agency, and then the House changed that language to the word may.
May at our request, and the reason that we requested that the word be changed is fairly simple. It would be almost impossible for us to mitigate or negotiate a settlement on every hospital claim in the state. We'd have to add another 5,000 to 6,000 people over there at the rate that we're going, and that's just impossible to do. So I got with the chairman and asked him to change the word to may instead of shall, and told him that we could promulgate the right rules and regulations that would probably solve the problem. So basically, to recap, Commissioner Harris told you that the genesis of this bill began in 2013 after the passed law of the ACA, better known as the Affordable Care Act or the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act. And in 2013, Blue Cross Blue Shield actually proposed this law to the House, and that's how it became a law on balanced billing. And that was to prevent consumers from being balanced billed when they went to a hospital that was in the network, and they may have gone to an emergency room that was in a network and got a balance bill for $4,000 or $5,000. So in the simplest terms, I think Commissioner Harris said that balance billing occurs when you are charged the difference between what a provider charges for service, and that's normally what they would normally charge, and what your insurance company will actually pay the provider, and that's called a network rate. And when the practice of balance billing is prohibited, while it's prohibited now, some health carrier providers fail to comply with the law, and some may not even be aware of the current law if they're from out of state, and especially out-of-state companies that employ medical providers and contract them out to the hospitals, such as emergency rooms. So House Bill 95 came about to try to prevent some of that, and I could go into a lot of detail, but for the sake of time, I'm going to give you some very quick, and I think I passed all of these out, examples of what we face, and this is this year within the last 6 months. And I think all but 3 of you have them, Angela, Senator Hill, and John Horn. I'm going to give these to you very quickly. So a lot of the complaints that we have are on air ambulances, and these are current air ambulances charges that we've had to negotiate and try to solve since December, and I have not gone back for the last several years, and we could go back and just give you a periphery of examples, but I think this will suffice. Irma, and by the way, we have to get permission to use their names. We just gave you the first name of most of them. So Irma got a bill for $29,071.95. She had assigned her benefits, and the insurance company paid $8,767. She was a balance bill for $20,304.95. Billy Kay had a bill of $39,204.11. Insurance company paid $15,894. He got a balance bill for $23,210.11. Constance, who's in a group health insurance plan, was airlifted, got a bill for $30,404.45. Insurance paid $7,414.98, and her balance bill was $22,986.47. Pamela H. Had a bill of $56,789.69. Insurance paid $11,670. She had a balance bill for $45,119.69, and I will tell you, she had an individual plan, and when she contacted us, the collection agency was already on her after 3 weeks for payment and to arrange a payment schedule. Robbie J. had a $50,294 bill. Insurance paid $8,915 and had a balance bill of $41,379. And by the way, this is a state health plan, and we kind of got involved to help the state health plan out. Helen M. Had an individual plan. She was 89 years old. I put her age in here just so you kind of understand some of the things that happen to older folks. Had a $36,000 bill and some few cents. The insurance paid $14,022, and the balance bill was $22,873.73. We were able to negotiate a settlement on that thanks to Director Williams. And if you add these numbers up, that's well over $180,000 just on the 6 examples that we've given you, and all of these have occurred since December. And we can give you a drawer full if you need them, but we try to keep this fairly simple and quick. On surprise billing, we've got 2 examples that we put on the sheet that we handed out. Tara F. went to the hospital or doctor and got a bill for $2,473. Insurance paid $1,800, and she had a balance bill of $673. Hannah had an individual plan. She went to the healthcare provider and got a bill for $989. The insurance company paid $195, and the balance bill was $70.94. Now, in some obvious mind, you're probably thinking, well, that's copay. This is after copay. This is after the copay had been paid. So these are actual true balance billing. We had a lady called Ms. I just call her Ms. Moore. Was provided anesthesiology services on 12/28/19. Her insurance company paid the in-network price for the bill services, which the healthcare provider accepted. And Ms. Moore continued to be billed for $354.51. We finally got that one resolved after her credit had been kind of damaged a little bit. Ms. Wood had an account turned over to Alliance Collection Agency for a bill that falls under the current balance billing law that we were able to resolve. Tara F. received a bill for $2,473. Her insurance company paid $1,800, and she continued to receive a balance bill of $673. Hannah received a bill for $989, and the insurance company paid $195 because they went network, and she continued to receive a balance bill of $794. We were able to resolve those. Those are just current collections that were tried on consumers that we've been able to solve. So people ask us, where do you stand on HB95? I think HB95 needs some teeth in it. If you're going to have the bill, you need someone to enforce it, and we're willing to do that. Now, the good thing is where we've been able to enforce the law, we've been doing it in facto without any real teeth, and companies have cooperated with us, so we've been pretty successful. I want to speak very quickly about air ambulances. Air ambulances are regulated by the Federal Aviation Administration and often claim that we have no jurisdiction to regulate what they charge. The FAA, it is true, regulates the charge for the air ambulance on air transportation, but they do not regulate the medical cost. We do. And I've taken the position as your commissioner to say that if you have a healthcare provider on that aircraft, you're performing a medical service. And you cannot balance bill on in-network if the insurance has been assigned. So far, we're batting 100% out of about 40. We haven't been popular, but I will tell you, we've been able to work with the owners and with some of the lobbyists to work through some of that, and some of them in the room, and they're aware of what I'm saying. So we've been able to do that without going to the newspapers and making headlines out of it. The federal government has said they were going to address the issue. So far, they have not. But just think of it like this. If the state airplane costs you about $1,000, it doesn't actually cost you that. It's $895 an hour if you use it. Think about an air ambulance charging you $60,000 for that hour. Think of it like this, that why do the air ambulances charge that much is because Medicaid and Medicare have a fixed rate that they reimburse the air ambulances for, which is the federal side, And their ambulance people will tell you unequivocally that they have to make their money up. And I tried to get in my head how I could relate that to legislators, so I just said I will take a shot at it. The governor and the lieutenant governor have free use of the state airplane, so if I wanted to use the state airplane, I've got to pay an exorbitant price to make up what they are not paying because they have free use, so I don't use the state airplane. I can't afford $1,000 an hour, so not on my budget anyway. So that's kind of a quick example of what we look at on air ambulances. I want to say that the University Medical Center has been a pleasure to work with. Many of you may remember that we had some problems with the UMMC and the air ambulances several years ago, and we were able to get a negotiator and work those problems out. Dr. Darcy has actually been easy to work with, and we've been able to work some real problems out without a lot of public fanfare, and I applaud them for what they've done. Someone has asked me about what happens when someone goes to the hospital, say to the pediatric or the emergency rooms, and they have an out-of-contract doctor at that emergency room operating the emergency room. We have taken the position with many of the healthcare providers, basically hospitals, that you cannot use a contract doctor and balance bill the consumer. If you go into the emergency room and you're there less than an hour and a half and you get a $5,000 bill, something's wrong with that picture, and it's usually because you have an out-of-network doctor that's on contract at the hospital, and the hospital's in a network. We've taken the position at the department that you cannot balance bill even if you have a contract doctor. If that hospital's in the network, we're not going to let you balance bill the consumer if they'll sign their insurance benefits. Lastly, before I close, I want to tell you a quick story about some of the other problems we run into on balance billing. We had a young man that called me a couple of weeks ago and said, Commissioner, I've got a $5,000 bill from the University Medical Center for taking my son in. He fell and hit his head, had a concussion, threw up. We weren't sure it was a concussion, so we rushed him into the emergency room. The doctor looked at him and said, we can give him an MRI, which is several $1,000s, or you can stay here for 3 hours, and if he's okay, you can go home. They stayed 3 hours, never saw another doctor. A young man went to the nursing station and said, I've been here 3 hours, what do I do? And she said, well, just go home. They went home, and he got a $5,000 bill. We thought we could help him, but he had a defined benefit plan. That's one of these short-term duration policies, you might call it, that paid, $180, if I recall, Mark? $250. And he got a bill for the $5,000, and Director Williams has been able to work with UMMC to try to work through that problem. It's inconceivable to me that you could charge $5,000 for a 3-hour stay in an emergency room. But what had happened was they elevated that child up from a level 2 to a level 4. And when you do that, you double the charges every time you go up. So if you went from a level 2 to a 3, your charges may be $2,000, and if you go to a level 4, they may be $4,000. So that's a type problem we look at on a daily basis at the agency. If there are any questions, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to take them.
Okay, Senator Black.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner, for coming and talking to us about this. At what stage does the insured contact your office? And is there going to be a special number, or walk us through that process?
Senator Blackwell, we have a special number that anyone can call, and we advertise it quite frequently when we do have the ability to advertise, and we do it every time we have media. We'll say call 1-800-562-2957 to ask for Andy or Ryan. That's become kind of the joke in the office, but that's how we get the word out. Unfortunately, there are many, many consumers in this state that do not know about the balance billing law, and when they call us, sometimes it's too late. They're already paying. If you can imagine that you're 60 years old, you're 5 years from getting Medicare, and you've got a $50,000 bill, and they want you to pay $500 a month, you'll be paying for the next 10 to 20 years on that bill with the interest that they charge you. It ruins their credit. So we've been able to help some of those people out. We've got most of the air ambulance services will work with us and understand the problem, but if it's been turned over to a collection agency, there's not a lot that we can do, unfortunately. Does that help you? Prior to, yes, sir. Yes, Mr. Chairman, may I?
Sure.
Senator Hill. to work through many of those, depends on how far down the road they are on, that the collection agency has started collecting money, but we've been able to solve just about 90% of those particular issues when a collection agency is involved. The main thing that happens, though, is it's not stopping the collection agency. The main thing that happens is the person's credit is ruined. And it's hard to fix your credit rating when it's been damaged. Call Andy Brown, 1-800-562-2957. We're here to help you. So I do want to tell you that in the last 12 years that I've been commissioner, I cannot recall a single case of a physician having a balance bill except for one case on breast reconstruction on the Gulf Coast, and we were able, that was just a misunderstanding in the coding area. So this bill generally does not affect physicians. It does not affect individuals that are in private practice. It's usually aimed at hospitals that have out-of-network contracts with anesthesiologists and people that run the emergency room. So if they know that we're going to enforce the bill and the balance billing law, we have less balance billing. And you know, it's hard times for a hospital. We hear that quite often, and the calls that we're on are frequent, and we understand the problems that hospitals are facing today, and I'm truly have empathy for them. I hope they survive because it affects the citizens of the state, but somewhere we've got to have a paradigm shift in the way we deliver health care in this country. But my job as a regulator is to be certain that the consumer is protected in this case. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If there are no further questions.
Commissioner, we appreciate you a bunch. We're now going to hear from Mississippi Hospital Association, Tim Moore, President CEO, and Richard Roberson, Vice President and Counsel.
Good morning. I'm Richard Robertson, General Counsel, Vice President for Policy and State Advocacy with Mississippi Hospital Association. My boss, Tim Moore, was not able to be here this morning, so he passed the baton to me. So I appreciate the opportunity to visit with y'all this morning. And on behalf of the 100 members, over 100 members of the Mississippi Hospital Association, there's 60,000 employees, we do appreciate the legislature looking at this issue. And let me be clear from the outset, MHA does not support balance billing or surprise billing. Okay, so I want to make sure that that's clear on the front end. Also, we do not oppose the bill for any other reason that it's not, we don't believe it's clear enough. We need more clarity. We need to take the example that other states have used and provide some additional stability, some direction, and some guidance to the Department of Insurance and to the public and to the healthcare providers and the health plans on what is needed. And we've got friends at the Department of Insurance, have worked with them for a number of years. They're good folks, and this is not in any way a slight or opposing what the Department of Insurance does, because we work with them all the time and have a great relationship with them. In most cases, it's not the hospital that we hear are the issues with the balance billing. Oftentimes, as Commissioner Cheney described, it is an out-of-contract or out-of-network physician group, an air ambulance company, but it's an out-of-network provider. Most of the time, our hospitals are in network with most insurance companies. There may be some exceptions here and there, but for the large part, hospitals are typically in network. But we do have a concern that as the industry continues to evolve, and particularly for our rural hospitals, that those networks narrow, and those networks become more narrow from the health plan perspective, and they meet just very minimally the state's network adequacy requirements. And when that happens, you will see more hospitals out of network, and you will see more leverage shifted from healthcare providers to insurance companies. And that's a very delicate relationship to begin with. This bill, as it's written now, does not have any guarantees in there that your rural hospital will be allowed to be in a network. And so we need to look at network adequacy. We need to look at what happens when those networks narrow, when providers are unnecessarily and not of their own volition cut out of networks and are essentially kicked out of a network or become an out-of-network provider and have zero to very little leverage to receive anything other than a fractional payment if it does fall out of network. And the bill that's written right now ostensibly would allow for a health plan to just pay a fractional amount to the medical provider, whether it's a hospital, whether it's a physician, and then walk away and leave the provider and the patient to have to figure it out. And they could walk away and just step out of the loop, and we don't think that's correct. So we totally agree that patients should be protected, but we believe that providers should too. We support removing the insured patient from the equation as much as possible and allow for a fair process for payment between the health plan and the provider. In 2019, Texas enacted legislation which balanced the concerns of all these parties. It describes specific instances in which the surprise billing law would apply. An out-of-network provider providing emergency services, for example, would apply under Texas's law. This would be an entity or a situation for which their balanced billing law would kick in. Same thing for an out-of-network physician that was practicing in a network facility such as a hospital. As Commissioner Cheney described, that situation does arise, and when that out-of-network physician is practicing in an in-network facility, there is a disconnect, and oftentimes there's a separate bill from the hospital and the physician that go to that patient. And so that's an area that we need to fix, and Texas was able to find a sweet spot on that. Same type of situation happens when there's an out-of-network lab or an out-of-network imaging company, and the facility, hospital, ambulatory surgical center, what have you, is in network. So we need to make sure that we've addressed that too, and Texas found a way to do that. Under the Texas law, they required health plans to make an out-of-network payment at the provider's usual and customary rate or another mutually agreed upon rate. If that wasn't possible, if they couldn't reach terms between the health plan and the provider, and remember, we're talking about an insured patient. We're not talking about an uninsured patient. This is for an insured patient, and it's an out-of-network issue. But if such a rate couldn't be agreed upon between the plan and the provider, then Texas described an arbitration process through its Department of Insurance that required plans to pay providers a reasonable payment. So again, you wouldn't have these exorbitant $40,000, $50,000 bills for an hour and a half of service, no matter how urgent it was. They took the patient out of the loop in Texas and just put it between the health plan and the provider. We need to do that in Mississippi. But under other circumstances in Texas, where that patient chose an elective procedure from an out-of-network provider, it was not an emergency situation, and there was an opportunity for the patient to be more informed, the balanced billing provisions there wouldn't apply in the same way, provided there was sufficient notice by the provider, by the medical facility, to the patient, and the patient was informed that that provider was going to be out of network. So there were distinctions there. Again, it balanced the fair interest of the plan, the provider, and the patient. So right now, the current law regarding balanced billing and assignment of benefits is not great. Okay, as Commissioner Cheney described, there's some issues with it right now. It's not a good law. We don't think this really makes it any better, to be honest with you. It does not chart a clear legislative intent to provide a process that such an important issue like this really deserves. At best, it appears to take the insurer out of the loop and interject the state into from a regulatory role into a mediator role, just to negotiate payments with no clear legislative direction as to what that should look like and what a reasonable payment might be. Also, it doesn't specifically define the circumstances under which a provider balanced billing or surprise billing situation would arise. At worst, it arguably would allow an insurer to pay an unreasonably low rate to the provider and just walk away and let the patient and the health plan and the provider just kind of sort it out, but the health plan could step out of the way. That causes some concerns because it provides insurance companies no incentive to have providers in network if that is the case. There's no incentive for the health plans to work with providers. And you've also set an arbitrarily low threshold for what an out-network payment is. So now you're negotiating in a private business transaction from the floor as opposed to somewhere closer to the middle. We need to limit the government interference in private negotiations between providers of health care and health plans to the extent that we can. We don't think there needs to be more regulatory intrusion into that private negotiation process between the plans and the providers, which interferes with that type of business relationship that ought to be done in a separate type of transaction. And without clear guidance on the law, it potentially has a detrimental impact of increasing the cost administratively of health care and giving rise to frivolous claims of balanced billing or surprise billing. We have concerns about that, just as an exhaustion of administrative agency time and dealing with that, as the Commissioner described. If that language wouldn't change from shall to may, they'd have to hire hundreds and thousands of more employees just to handle that. And most of those claims, I suspect, would end up being a frivolous claim. It would not be a balanced billing or a surprise billing situation. It would just be someone that didn't like the bill, which that does happen. So again, MHA does not support balanced billing. I do want to be clear about that, but we do support a level playing field, or as much as one is possible between health plans and providers, particularly for our rural hospitals. We also remain concerned, as I was saying earlier, this is a piece of legislation that deals with the insured. We remain extremely concerned right now about the growing number of uninsureds as a result of this pandemic. With the growing financial pressures on our hospitals and our healthcare industry, we're concerned that many individuals may seek cheaper health plans as they lose their traditional commercial coverage, that they may seek cheaper plans on the market which offer scant benefits, very limited benefits, which essentially make most of their services out of network. This will exacerbate an already bad situation for both the patient and the provider, and those narrow networks could disproportionately impact certain rural hospitals, but also restrict the freedom of choice of providers with narrow physician and hospital networks in our more populated areas. So it does become a hospital and a physician issue at that point as well. We'd love to be here today talking about ways that we can expand coverage, because we're going to need it. We've got hundreds of thousands of people in Mississippi that are already without insurance coverage, and we've got over 200,000 folks that just in the last couple of months have left employment in Mississippi and have become unemployed. Just as we've extended additional unemployment benefits to those who normally wouldn't qualify, we need to be looking at ways to expand health care coverage in a way that is beneficial to those patients and beneficial to the providers and fair and reasonable for the state to do it. So again, as hospitals are already struggling, we need to find a way to compensate them for their services. We need to make sure that we've addressed those out-of-network situations to make sure that the patients are protected. And then finally, I would add to the conversation that as far as the issue of balanced billing goes and surprise billing, all the federal money that's just been given over the last couple of months to healthcare providers comes with strings attached, of course. And one of those items is in the terms and conditions, the attestation statements that hospitals and other healthcare providers have to sign in order to receive and accept the HHS payments. They have to agree not to do any balanced billing or surprise billing. So that's a condition of receipt of those federal dollars. Hospitals received about $450 million, another $300 to $350 million went to other healthcare providers across the state of Mississippi. So there's a catch right there in the provider payments that just went out from HHS to address provider billing, provider surprise billing, and balance billing. We believe that decreases the urgency to act on this year. We'd like to come back with you next year, working with the Commissioner and his staff, with health plans and with patient advocacy groups, to try to do what Texas did in 2019, which is find that sweet spot which gives it some clarity, gives the department clear directions from the legislature, and allows providers and patients and health plans to know what they're working with. We will commit to working with the legislature, with the Commissioner, and with all the patient groups and physicians and providers to get that done. We would just ask for more clarity in the process. So thank you very much. I'm glad to answer any questions.
Warren, you had a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Robertson, you answered most of my questions toward the end of your talk, where you actually stated that the Hospitals Association is not in favor of this legislation at this time in its current form. And is that uniform amongst hospitals? Are there any hospitals that support this legislation?
Not that I'm aware of. I'm not aware of any hospitals that do. I've not heard from them.
And you further mentioned that it's mostly these out-of-network situations that account for why you get a lot of this surprise billing or balance billing. Is that correct?
That's been my understanding. The examples in the phone calls I've received from consumers, typically it's a situation where that provider was out of network, and oftentimes it was a bill that did not come from the hospital for hospital services. It was other services that the patient received while in the hospital.
Okay, and you also mentioned that with the help that's come from the federal government, there are strings attached that include the fact that you can't do surprise billing or balance billing.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. The payments that came out from HHS as part of the coronavirus, the CARES Act payments, Mississippi hospitals, Mississippi physicians, other healthcare providers in Mississippi received a total of $700+ million. Hospitals received about $450 million. And what they have to do to receive and keep the money is they have to sign an attestation that has a laundry list of terms and conditions that they agree to in accepting the money. And one of the provisions of that is that they agree not to do any balance billing or surprise billing.
Thank you, Mr. Robertson. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Hill?
Yes, sir.
I've seen in numerous news reports that hospitals got more than $700 million. But can you briefly tell us what determines how much each hospital got?
Well, it's kind of complicated, but so basically the first tranche of money that came out from HHS was about $30 billion across the country. And they weighted the distribution based on each hospital's percent of Medicare revenue. So they kind of did a first pass and lined everybody up and put you all in the same pool. And if you did 0.005% Medicare compared to everybody else in the country, then you got 0.005% of $30 billion. Is kind of the short explanation of it.
That's what I saw. I just wanted to clarify that.
Yes, ma'am. Then the second passes were based off different weights, and then the third pass was for rural hospitals, and it was based off their operating margins, operating budgets, essentially, compared to everybody else. And the rural hospital distribution is probably the most significant piece for Mississippi, because we had about 70 hospitals receive a payment under that, which was absolutely crucial for our rural hospitals. Total for the rural hospital distribution was around $280 million for our rural hospitals, which will give them a lifeline for a couple of months. There are several strings attached on it. It's obviously COVID-related expenses are part of it. There's some language in there that does allow it to be spent for expenses and lost revenue attributable to COVID on that piece. So there are some things in there, but it's a laundry, about a 5-page terms and conditions thing with strings attached. Yes, ma'am.
Richard, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate your time this morning.
Thank
you
you.
so much. Dr. Jennifer Bryan? Oh, did you have one? Wait, we had a question. I'm sorry, Rick. One quick one.
Mr. Chairman, not so much a question, but I would like to hear the commissioner's rebuttal to the proposition, if that's acceptable to you.
Can we do it after? Let's get all our speakers, if you don't
Sure.
mind, please. And then we do that? I don't want to run out of time. We've got 2 more speakers. Dr. Bryan? Dr. Jennifer Bryan, Chair of the Board of Trustees of the Mississippi State Medical Association, and a familiar face around here when you're not wearing a mask. She served as Doctor of the Day for us several times. Thank you for being with us, Dr. Bryan.
Good morning, and thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the committee this morning. I stand here before you, and I'm going to open up my phone, so I apologize. I stand before you representing the nearly 5,000 members of the Mississippi State Medical Association. We're the voice of the physicians of Mississippi. We represent all specialties and are a quite large organization. We're involved with the American Medical Association. Just for some background about who I am, I'm a family doctor in Flowood. That's my full-time job. Volunteerism with the State Medical Association just because I'm passionate about advocacy and doing what's right for our patients. And that's what this conversation really is about today. It's about them, your constituents, and my patients, my primary care patients. the State Medical Association, let me be clear, we support the commissioner's initiative and efforts here. We feel like it's a step in the right direction. Because let's be honest, we've been working on this now for several years. We've got House of Delegates policy dating back several years now about balanced billing. And I kind of laugh about that name when I looked at it because that's a cute name, balanced billing, but what it really means is the balance of the bill, right? I mean, we're not balancing anything. We're just kind of putting it on the back of the patient. Here's the balance of the bill. In primary care in Mississippi, you know, I take care of a lot of impoverished patients. A lot of our insured patients, they struggle. And I've seen these air ambulance balances, and I've seen these out-of-network balances. Things have changed over the past 15 years in regards to the practice of medicine. Many of you know that it's about 51%, so over half of physicians are now employed. Some of these are hospital employers, some of them aren't. But the autonomy, it's changed some. So there is some leverage at the level of the hospitals and of the bigger organizations as to who they contract with. And so I would put forth that if I were a hospital and I was going to hire a team of doctors to man my emergency room or my pathology department or my anesthesia department or whoever I contracted with, I would be a shrewd negotiator at the beginning. And I would negotiate that they must be in network to take care of my people. Physicians have no issue if we are doing something, and you heard him say, the commissioner said that there have been essentially no complaints on physicians. There was one, there was a misunderstanding. But if we've got bad actors, we're okay with being policed. We really are. I mean, that's our public. Those are our patients. So far, we're doing okay, I think. But, you know, if things change in 20 years, I'm okay with that. We've got regulatory boards. We've got a public that we serve. We cannot bankrupt our patients. This has been going on far too long. I've seen these bills. They're $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 for these ambulances. And it's not just that, though. There are other, I went to the ER, the things that those examples are very real. I see them in the exam room. Is this perfect? Maybe, maybe not, but it is definitely a step in the right direction. Now, you may hear from other physicians and other physician groups, and sometimes the House of Medicine is not entirely unified on every single thing, just like you guys aren't either. But we have debated this, and we know it's a problem. And years ago, we asked for congressional help, and, you know, they are helping us. It's a complicated issue, but we do support the commissioner in this, in taking a step in the right direction. What we're doing now is not working. It's not. And we've just been going round and round. And so I applaud the efforts to at least step forward and try to get something going. We know it's a problem. We have not seen this to be a problem in the backs of physicians. And for that reason, we believe that the physicians and the hospitals can come together and negotiate a better situation for our patients. And the State Medical Association, for that reason, supports this as a step in the right direction. I think I've kind of been clear about how we feel about that. I'll be glad to open the floor to any questions. I've also got our Executive Director and Governmental Affairs Director here with me if we have any questions there as well.
Have any questions? Dr. Bryan? We sure thank you for taking time out of your day to come see us today.
Y'all are always so good to let me come before you. I appreciate the time so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, another familiar face, Dr. Bill Grantham. I've seen him here several times as a doctor today. We thank you for your service, too. He's representing the Mississippi Academy of Family Physicians. Thank you for coming today, Dr. Grantham. See you on TV all the time.
Not sure that's such a good thing sometimes. I'm Dr. Bill Grantham. I'm representing the Mississippi Academy of Family Physicians. We're about 1,300 strong in the state with physicians, residents, and students. And like many have said before, we do not support the concept of balanced billing. And in fact, we, as primary care physicians, as Dr. Bryan just mentioned, generally don't do balanced billing. And we do see and we do hear of these examples that clearly do happen. So we're all in the same boat on that. But as Richard said from the Hospital Association, there are issues in the wording of this bill that do raise concern among my members. And so any discrepancy, I believe is the language, somewhere on line 300 and something, says any discrepancy. Well, there's a real concern with that. It's not well outlined. And with family physicians, I can just see patients being disgruntled. It's a complicated issue over copays, deductibility, and those kind of issues. And I really don't want, as the Commissioner Cheney didn't want, I don't want our offices overburdened with having to research, supply information, use resources that take away from time for patient care to adjudicate these. I think the language clearly needs to be worked on. Would be glad to help in that regard from our academy. And as Dr. Bryan said, MSMA would too. Most of our members, quite frankly, are members of MSMA too. So as you can see, there is some division here, but I'm speaking for the Mississippi Academy of Family Physicians, and we would respectfully ask that there be consideration for changing the language, whether that is the ability to do that as currently, or whether we need to consider doing that in another legislative session.
Okay. Senator Horn has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Doctor, you got these two physician groups. Why are they not on the same page?
Well, family physicians are one specialty. MSMA represents the collective. We, like any group, just like legislators, are not always going to be on the same page with everything. And when we hear from our members and we hear concerns, the lack of some clarity in this and the potential that that further causes issues from not just a regulatory now, but a legislative process affecting our physicians and potentially the expediency of their reimbursement at a time, as has been mentioned, when right now many of these practices are suffering greatly. And many of the practices, other than the PPP money, they may have gotten a fraction of money from CARES, depending on how much of their patient population was Medicare. But many of them are really struggling, the small practices out there that are not physician-owned or are not employed physicians. So the point is that they're just concerns. These people, Dr. Bryan and David and Claude, are my friends, my buddies. As past president of MSMA, I've worked with them over the years on many things, but we don't always agree and see eye to eye. So that's why I'm here, just to present the other side, and let's think about this and consider modifying the language.
And what would you suggest as a path forward from today if we don't pass this bill?
If you don't pass this bill today, then I would suggest that we sit down together, have some dialogue about what kind of things could work. None of us want balanced billing. The air ambulance issues were clearly one of the big examples of something gone way wrong. Some of the emergency room billing. We need to look at how, I believe as Richard mentioned, we make sure that physicians at an in-network hospital, as much as we can, are in-network. We don't want to pit patients against physicians in this billing thing. We want to work better to make sure that the insurers are having to reply and respond and deal with this issue, rather than just, as Richard, I believe, said, leaving the providers hanging out to dry. Also, they're leaving the patients hanging out to dry in that instance, too.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you,
very
Dr.
much.
Grant. Okay, former Senator, Commissioner Cheney, would you respond to Senator Blackwell's question? Did you want to restate your question, please, Senator Blackwell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, I'd just like to hear your rebuttal on Mr. Robertson's presentation, and particularly the Texas law, if you're familiar with that.
So we looked at the Texas law, and the problem with the Texas law that it incorporates into statute things that are normally called rules and regulations. Now, you got to remember that the Texas legislature only meets every other year, and they already have problems with this law as it's been passed in Texas. I often am on calls 2 to 3 times a week with all of the other commissioners in the United States, and I can tell you this is an issue not just in Mississippi, It's an issue in Nebraska, North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, Colorado, California. I can name every state in the union has a problem with balanced billing. I didn't write the law, but it's my baby, as y'all would say, and I'm kind of rocking it. And I would tell you that the law that is written here gives us a lot of leeway to write rules and regulations without putting in the statute things that are concrete. Statutory law tends to leave out the flexibility to govern, which is really a problem for you if you're a regulator. In the case of the family practitioners, one of my best friends is a family practitioner, and he called me about the bill, and he said, we're not going to oppose you. I don't know where he is on this bill, but I said, Randy, we have never had a single complaint on a family practitioner, except they didn't charge enough. When you can go there for your primary care position. So I don't know what the rub is with the family practitioners. But to the point of the hospital association, if the hospital association in Mississippi is not for transparency in pricing, they're going to get it next year, whether they like it or not. It's coming from the federal government, unless the corona pandemic or the coronavirus pandemic or COVID-19, whatever you want to call it, side rails it, you're going to get transparency in pricing. And when that comes, the whole world's going to change. I'm trying to get ahead of that. And what we will say is this to the hospitals. This bill does limit government interference between private contractors and hospitals. The problem's not doctors. It's not the providers or the physicians. The problem are the hospitals themselves. When you hire an out-of-network person to run your emergency room, knowing that they're going to bill someone $3,000 or $4,000 to make that nut for 8 hours or 9 hours of work in that hospital or emergency room, you've got a problem. This is aimed at trying to reduce that. The hospitals that have their physicians on contract and pay them the salary, you don't have a problem with the physicians, but they get blamed for the balance billing, not the hospital. I would tell you that I'm reminded of the song by Muddy Waters. I think what Richard's done is, he's a great guy, by the way, he's a friend. He's muddied the water well enough to confuse the issue, and the issue here is really simple. It's very simple. It's about balanced billing. You need rules and regulation on what is or is not a balanced bill. And that's what we're looking at. It's your bill as the Senate. It passed the House unanimously. I don't think there was a single vote against the bill. It's the Senate's bill now, and whatever you do with it's up to you. I think the bill needs teeth in it, whether I'm the regulator that would enforce the balanced billing or the Attorney General. Somebody needs to do it. If you're not going to enforce the law, then you need to remove it from the books. But when you do that, you're going to hurt the consumers of this state. My statutory job is to protect the consumers of this state. Real simple.
Got a question from Senator Boyd.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner.
Commissioner, just clarification, and I think I'm reading this correctly through here. Balance billing is that is not a copay. Would that be correct?
That would be correct. You still got to pay copay, and the hospitals and the providers can bill you for the copay, and you have to pay that. You've got a deductible. Now, I didn't get off onto the rabbit trail of rural hospitals, but I could speak for hours on the rural hospital problems that you have. But the very people that what the hospital association is saying is going to happen are going to be the people that are hurt the worst if you don't have a balanced billing law or some teeth in it, because the ACA is looked at as kind of a money basket for people to go get money out of, and most of those people are covered in the Delta, and those are the hospitals that are in trouble. And if you start balanced billing because you don't have network adequacy, as Richard has said, then you would have a problem. But there's a law on network adequacy that the legislature passed. In an urban area, 30 miles or 30 minutes to get to a physician or a provider. Rural areas, 1 hour or 60 miles. Sometimes you can't go 30 miles in Jackson in an urban area in an hour, but that's the network. And that's what we live by. And if you don't have adequacy in the medical coverage, then we have to get involved from a point of view as a regulator. And we can force healthcare providers to get into network if they are not network adequate, say in Indianola, Greenville, just name it, or Hollandale, wherever you want to go.
Thank you. Commissioner?
Does this answer your question, Senator? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I want to mention that, you know, we've had great discussion on both sides of the issue, and my attempt was to make sure we had people to discuss all sides of it. I want to mention from our agenda that we had some others who were invited, and I want to give you some feedback on what we got from them. United Healthcare is a very large provider, was invited, and through their lobbyists, they were not able to be here today, but I was told that they're okay with the bill since the word may has been put in the bill instead of it shall. Blue Cross and Blue Shield was not able to be here today. They were invited as well. And American Medical Response was invited. We've had a lot of discussion about ambulances. They were not able to make it, but their quote through their lobbyists was that they don't oppose or support the bill. That's where we stand. I appreciate everybody being here today. Senator Horn moves to rise and report.
Rise and report.
All right.